Your Lordship, Honorable Chief Justice of India, Justice Thakur, Honorable Justice Dalveer Bhandari of the International Court of Justice, my co-panelists, Mr. M.K. Raina and Mr. Siddharth Varadrajan, distinguished members of the audience and dear friends. I would like to thank Aman Hingorani, the author, for having invited me to give some of my impressions after reading his book. Given my own professional background, I have read the book with specific interest insofar as the interface between the Kashmir issue and the United Nations is concerned. It is a pity that despite the Simla Agreement of 1972, what is called the India-Pakistan question, which is a reference to Kashmir in the Security Council's agenda, continues to be kept alive year after year by a letter written by Pakistan to the Security Council every year. Contrast this with the way in which Lebanon successfully persuaded the Security Council to delete its complaint against aggression by the United Arab Republic from the Council's agenda in November 1958, following a bilateral agreement between Lebanon and the United Arab Republic. Chapters 6 and 7 of the book deal in detail with the Kashmir reference to the United Nations. I find it refreshingly relevant that 70 years after the tragic events that overtook this region and its people, the book refocuses on the core issue placed by India before the United Nations on the 1st of January 1948. The core issue is the aggression committed against the territorial integrity of India. The territorial integrity of member states of the United Nations is upheld by Article 2.4 of the United Nations Charter. I find it relevant that the author proposes as a first step to finding a solution to this problem a return to the basic legal framework that led to the accession of Jammu and Kashmir to India in 1947. Chapter 9 of the book is essential for understanding his proposal to refer the Jammu and Kashmir issue to the International Court of Justice. This reference has been formulated by the author on the basis of 8 points, which are on page 302 of his book, and which flesh out his anticipation in chapter 12 of how the issue could be deliberated by the International Court of Justice. The author's proposal may be interesting also in light of the dramatis personae who dealt with the Kashmir issue in the United Nations at the beginning. This book is being launched when we have been commemorating the 125th birth anniversary of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, popularly known as the father of the Indian Constitution. One of my predecessors at the United Nations, Sir Benegal Nath Singh Rao, was probably selected to represent India's case in the Council between June 1948 and February 1952 because of his personal knowledge of the princely state of Jammu and Kashmir, where he had served as Prime Minister between 1944 and 1945, as well as his role in drafting India's constitution. Sir B.N. Rao was also the first Indian judge to be elected to the International Court of Justice from February 1952 until his untimely death in November 1953. Dr. Ambedkar said of B.N. Rao's work in the Constituent Assembly, and I quote, "The credit that is given to me does not really belong to me. It belongs partly to Sir B.N. Rao, the constitutional advisor to the Constituent Assembly, who prepared a rough draft of the Constitution for the consideration of the drafting committee," unquote. I hope that this book will encourage research into the personal papers of the persons involved in the United Nations on this issue, like B.N. Rao, to examine how India's constitutional provisions and the treatment of the Kashmir issue in the United Nations Security Council were kept in mind by India's legal luminaries of that time. From a broader and equally topical perspective, I was struck by the way in which Aman places his subject in the context of the geostrategic imperatives in our region of what a former British intelligence officer, Arthur Connolly, had called the Great Game 150 years ago. With the pivot to Asia and the One Belt, One Road initiatives, the Great Game in this century will extend to broader regions and involve newer players. India, because of its location, population, and size, is one of them. The author's research into the deliberations of the Security Council in 1948 illustrate vividly the reason why so many of us believe that India must be represented in the Council in a permanent capacity. We cannot expect others, even our so-called strategic partners, to altruistically safeguard our national interests in this Council. Whether such interests revolved around our territorial integrity in 1948 or around the fight against terrorism today, or around the jostling for resources and space for development and the eradication of poverty in the future, the most obvious fact that remains is that 1.2 billion Indians, or 1/5 of humanity, cannot be kept out of the Security Council in perpetuity. That is why I would commend a close reading of this book, and I look forward to seeing how readers will respond to Aman's call for action. Thank you.